Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Lathrix, and of course, welcome back to the sandbox mode, in which we're going to be doing a little bit of testing, because ultimately, we need a new vehicle which can deal with very, very heavily armoured opponents, because right now, both our tanks and the enemy tanks of the Onyx Watch have a stupidly high level of armour value. It takes a very long time to kill them, and the battles can be drawn on a little bit too long. So because of this, I think we should go back to basics. Now, ramming vehicles in this game can be a little bit broken because, honestly, it seems like the ramming mechanic completely ignores health and armor of blocks. Now, maybe it only ignores the armor value, but it seems like it ignores absolutely everything. As you just saw then, that just shredded through heavy armor like it was paper. And coming back again, and this vehicle took me maybe 5 minutes, so imagine the power of a proper melee vehicle when it's all done properly, in a proper way. It's a pretty fast way to end a fight, and the best thing is with these types of vehicles is that it's an all or nothing sort of approach. If the melee vehicle gets the kill, it really gets the kill. It's quick, efficient, and the enemy dies. If it doesn't get the kill, normally it gets killed itself because it's just put itself in melee range, and every single cram cannon in the world can probably hit it, at least at point blank range. On the upside, this does also promote a lot of friendly fire. Now, I'm not quite sure how powerful this will be against something like the Rhino, which has a lot of empty space on the inside, but against things like our lovely Pharaoh tank there, and things like the Bison, and, oh, what's the name of the other one? The Sentinel. I think it will work very well, since it does have all the turrets on the outside, which are vulnerable to being destroyed. Let's see what happens here. Not the best angle, honestly, but still. Well, half of the spin block got knocked off. You know what? I think it'll work just fine, especially because, again, that spin block needs to be armored up drastically. I love it. Okay then, so let's destroy the enemy, and let's get to work making this thing a reality. Whoa, you've got all the way through there. So this is very similar to a design I built in the last Ashes of the Empire campaign, which I'll spawn in just a second, going off basically the same principle, except for now, I'm better at building, especially when it comes to armor, so hopefully this will be a lot more durable than that version, a lot faster, and ultimately cheaper, actually. This may be the weapon to end the Onyx Watch, and it looks like this. Am I proud? I don't know. And so here is the original. So, this vehicle does certainly work, but the problem is, it's far, far too expensive, and there's a load of things I would do differently if I was building it now. Although, I do sort of love its tiny little cram cannon, which can do a fair bit of damage if it gets a lucky hit, but not exactly a main weapon. Let's wait until it actually reaches the target so I can show off its melee capabilities. Great shot there. And here it is, the spin block activates, and there we go. Most of the outer, in fact all of the outer armor completely shredded in the first hit, and then the melee vehicle shows off its weakness. It cannot get up to speed fast enough. It's too heavy and too liable to simply stand there for too long. Lots of twos there. Either way, the enemy is defeated, and so the spin blocks are going back to their original position, which just so happens to cut it up even more. Oh look, a Sentinel. Hello, Sentinel. So we need it to be lighter, we need it to be a little bit more stable, and we need it to be far, far cheaper. At almost 60,000 resources, it's just not worth the cost. I also hate that bounce, but that's just the physics in this game, sadly. It's very hard to make a melee vehicle which doesn't bounce upon its first hit, at least if you're using the spin block system. If you're using a more regular ram, you can normally hit the enemy without bouncing. Now, to lessen the bounce, one other thing you can do is simply be a little bit slower. This vehicle goes up to 70 meters per second when it's at absolute full speed, and that always causes the bounce. Going down to maybe 50 would probably be a bit less extreme. Still, though, you can kind of see where it's sliced, can't you? Hey, Rhino. That was one glitchy weapon. So, yeah, that's basically it. This is the old version. Hopefully we're going to make a scaled down, much cheaper, and more reliable version. Although, this still definitely gets the job done, even though it hasn't aged perfectly. What are you stuck on? You're stuck on something. Probably a bit of the enemy currently stuck on the floor. Can't see what you're stuck on, but you were. Okay, back to building the new version. Less reminiscing about the past. Since I don't want this to be an exact carbon copy of the old version, one thing I've never really tested out is just a static ramming section. So what if we make something similar to a plough at the front, completely covered in the glorious rams? Maybe that'll work, maybe it'll be absolutely dreadful. Now, we could go down the route of using a drill, but honestly, I have never had any luck with drills, even after they got updated. I just don't like them. Every time I use them, all I can think of is, this could have been better with a RAM build. So maybe in the future I'll do that, but I think that will take a whole day of just testing out different builds with that and hopefully getting something somewhat decent. So how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, I just want to see how effective a static wall of spikes can actually be. So before we make this look any good, we're just going to build this. Yep, it looks utterly dreadful, but it will get the job done, and then of course we'll add all these rams. Now, the reason why this craft is constantly trying to move is because it's still got all the basics from the old version, from the missile base, but I've just reversed everything, so now it's constantly trying to go forwards, and will never really try to go backwards. When it's done, it will stay still if enemies aren't present, because otherwise we're just kind of impossible to control. And that is actually okay. And that's where the spin block is better. Although that definitely works out. And it's flipped the target completely. Well, that was unexpected, but yeah, the spin block version definitely did better. So the spin block, really, it's not so much for the added speed to the rams, it's because of how it interacts with things. First of all, that little bounce back isn't terrible as long as you can get back up to speed fast enough. And secondly, it causes the rams to essentially be in a whole circle area, making the enemy far more vulnerable to being hit somewhere, rather than just the rams sort of getting stuck. Still, I mean, it did work. Definitely needs some downwards thrusters, otherwise that's going to happen every single time, but it worked, I suppose.
Turning off.
Look how tiny this craft is, though. Fear me! Yeah, definitely going to stick with the spin blocks, but I don't want just one huge spin block like before. What I'm thinking is loads of little spin blocks with shorter range, but hopefully that will make them a little bit more reliable. So, I'll be right back once I've done that. How about we try something I have not really used properly yet, and that is the Mighty Piston. So, pretty simple really, just when the enemy is within X range, Piston activates, moves forward, and sort of acts like a ram. When the enemy is not within X range, simply revert back to where it was. Now, of course, this will only be good in the very first attack. You could have it going out and then back in, I suppose, at regular intervals, but I think this would just be the easier option. Now, of course, the problem is I have to build this piston kind of here already, although that's not necessarily true. Control block, let's just put this here for now. Once again, this isn't the final form, this is me just doing a little bit of testing. So piston, extend to... And actually, we also want the velocity absolutely maxed out, so I'm going to need 3 of these. So, first one, piston, set velocity to maximum, and just activate that every few seconds, just so it's always active. So, if we check this, yep, that's on maximum. So, the next one, this will be if there's no enemies present. So, once again, pistons, Set extension to... Now, I don't actually know how far I want this right now. It's resting. And that is actually really close to being exactly where I wanted it. A little bit less, maybe? Or we could just round it off. Yeah, sure, a bit of a gap will be fine. So that's at 20, and that is if an enemy is... Where are you? If enemy range is above, or there's no enemies, 500. So if there's an enemy... Actually, maybe even closer than that, since we want this to activate and move forwards at the moment we're hitting the target, so we still want it going forwards as we hit. That way we are adding velocity to the attack if the game actually works in that way, which I'm assuming it will, and even if it won't, it'll look pretty darn cool. Now, if there is an enemy, so if enemy range is less than 300, we want our lovely piston to extend to maximum. Which will be like, oh well, we can't really test it because the other one instantly overrides it. But yeah, you get the idea. So let's put another one of these here. And for the sake of making sure this just works, let's just very quickly put on some metal. Just one now, I suppose. Ah, there's the problem. One of these has to be slightly larger than the other. Not that really matters. We shouldn't be able to tell the difference when it's finished. So... shouldn't really care too much about that, at least in theory. Now, the other thing to note is you can put pistons on pistons, which means we could have multiple pistons moving this forward even quicker. So we'll see if this works, and then maybe we'll go down that route. Although, adding more pistons just adds more vulnerable points to the weapon itself, and obviously, that's not exactly great. Well, let's see if this even works for a start. Sentinel, hello. Ah, well, that extended already because, of course, the Sentinel was too close. Normally, we'd be going towards the Sentinel, not the Sentinel suddenly spawning next to us. So, it acts very similar to the spin block with the bounce and stuff, and, yep, that works just fine. But it's lacking the area of effect of the spin block, that's the only problem. But, this could be a lot more heavily armoured, a lot easier. That's the thing. Yep, still definitely worked, although it did look like a broom kind of trying to kill a tank, which is really weird. Well, yep, it was definitely extending as it hit the target. Not really sure if that really helped or anything, but it's definitely weird looking. Not quite as fast as I would like in terms of, extending. So, I do think that spin blocks are going to be a lot more reliable, and that's the big problem. Ultimately, reliability is the main thing we're looking for. And also, we need to be a bit faster at turning, since this vehicle isn't really intended for this just yet. Yeah, faster turning, and even more drift. Well, I'll definitely experiment with that in the future. I think this won't be our only melee vehicle, but to start off with, we need something which is just completely reliable. So I think we're going to have a few very heavily armoured, but smaller spin blocks along the front. Maybe 3 of them, so one here, and then one here. And then stick with this type of speed, but faster turning. Okay, yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Yep, there's that bounce. Way too much of it. It's when you get to this speed, that's when the damage really racks up, and wow, yep. Oh, I've also added spikes to the top of these spin blocks, which, as you can tell, it means if an enemy does end up bouncing on top, it gets absolutely destroyed. That was still faster than the Hesh tanks can deal with a target, but still we need to do something about that bounce. That is so much wasted damage. Oh. Now, to be fair, this tank, well, this vehicle is quite heavily armoured, so it should be able to survive. That's better. Slightly lower speed, look at that damage increase. So, it is all about speed, at least when you're using spin blocks. But the thing is, this needs to at least be quick enough to catch up with targets, and a lot of the Onyx Watch vehicles can go 30 meters per second. And we're not honestly all that much faster, we're only going at about 45-50 at the moment. And I don't really want to go lower than that, since I want to be able to get to the target as soon as possible, so I think the bounce may be a necessary evil. Man, this looks evil already, and it's not exactly finished. Oh, also, this makes for one of the best type of capturing vehicles, because if I'm inside of this, a lot of the time, these will kill the mainframe before completely destroying the enemy, and then since I'm so close, I will auto-capture it. Although I do feel like this needs to be a bit more heavily armored now, since, yeah, bit of the firing line here. So I think underneath here, I'll add some regular stationary rams and a bit more protection. I'll extend this all the way over to here because I think it'll look cool to have them all sort of being held rather than just being placed on top of things. And then I have to consider, am I going to add any form of ranged weaponry here? One thing I could add is a missile system. And I know, we just removed the missile system, but for a very specific type of missile. There we are, which is the Harpoon. Where are you? There we are, the Harpoon. Harpoon head with 200 meters of cabling, works with the missile winch block to attach onto targets and winch them in. This will also increase our speed, but will make us more stuck to a target, which is pretty awesome. It also means we can do something versus flyers. At the moment, the AI is set up to go against ground units at all cost and then ignore anything above the ground. But this could at least do something. We do have a lot of ammo, but there's the thing, we could remove all the ammo from this vehicle and make it incredibly sturdy. Having no ammunition storage would mean this would be very hard to kill, even by friendly fire. Which would be nice. Okay, a bit of a test here. The Pharaoh tank versus the new melee vehicle. Now, with a quite weak shield on the front because I had a bit of spare power. I've also removed all of the ammo because that's going to be the whole point of this thing. Because I want each vehicle to be unique. I want them to have one role and only one role so they support each other. This shouldn't have firepower. It should be very heavily armoured for this base anyway, and it should have pure speed and melee capabilities, perhaps a couple of weak shields, but that's it, no ranged weaponry. Now this is going to come down to where this tank hits. If it hits the wheels, it can really glitch it out. Like that, for instance. That stopping instantly as soon as a wheel is destroyed is horrendous. Wow, need a stronger shield. That shield was utterly worthless. Well, no, it did deflect a couple of shots. Still alive, and there we go, the damage has begun. There goes an entire section, and will it get through to the ammo stores or the weapon? It seems like it won't, amazingly. But still, yep, there we go, the tank has been destroyed, even from that initial not fantastic start. That was pretty brutal. Now, I remember there was a glitch a while back that when a wheel is destroyed, essentially all of the wheels lost their momentum for a while. I can't remember if that's still the case, but as you can see, damaging the bottom section there instantly causes problems with this thing's speed. Still though, defeated the Pharaoh tank quite convincingly, if a bit close range to begin with, but I guess in the battle setup stage, that's how close I would spawn this thing in. I like how it spins idly. That makes me smile. So, some of the batteries were destroyed. Okay, that's why it slowed down so much at the start. Okay, note to self, battery compartment is vulnerable. Okay, so, quite a few changes then. The shield is now 3 times stronger, although it won't particularly be great versus cram cannon shots. It should still be great against very low arms fire, so rapid fire weapons firing armor penetration rounds, or any shell going very quickly, will be deflected. And honestly, I can see those type of shells being one of the weaknesses of this craft, easily stripping all the weapons on the front, causing some damage to the wheels, and ultimately making it so it can't really move properly. I've added some more armor to the battery section, in fact a lot more armor around the battery section, and then I have removed all the ammo. I then upped the turning a little bit with some extra thrusters and one internal blade, which should make it a little bit more accurate. Hopefully, this is going to be okay. Now, with the steam boiler I've installed, this does mean it will be costing material to run, but only at a rate of 1 resource per second. So, every minute only 60 resources, it's not exactly all that expensive to run, and even when that goes down, it does still have the RTG backup. Although I am tempted to completely remove the RTG so that the initial cost is lower, and then simply double or triple up the steam boilers. But we'll make that call before we go to the campaign. That won't be too difficult to change. I think this is going to be okay. So, we should have a one-on-one fight. Okay, I have chosen this particular enemy because it has almost the identical cost, but it does have more volume, so that should be pretty good. Now, this does rely on missiles quite a bit, so that might not go in its favour, but it does still have a nasty cram cannon. So, let's see how this turns out. Although its turning is very slow, maybe I should have spawned them in differently. I will do another battle afterwards. Hello? Yep, there goes the side instantly and cutting straight through. Yeah, needless to say, that was a very clear victory, but not a particularly fair spawning if we wanted to actually do a fair test. My god, it still managed to hit us, doing nothing. And it's now 2 damaged, and goodbye. Definitely worth having the rams on the top. The amount of times things are going to bounce on top because of how low these spin blocks are is ridiculous. But that's not really too bad, since a lot of enemies will focus on something that close. If we're underneath the enemy, it simply can't hurt us. Although I am actually tempted to have a small spin block here, just with upwards facing rams. Okay, let's spawn in something else and see how that goes. Here we go, the last proper fight, the Bison versus the new melee vehicle. Now, the Bison is about double the cost of the melee vehicle, and honestly, it is one of the scarier regular vehicles the Onyx Watch uses. So, let's just see how this goes then. I've also jumped out this time as well, so this way I won't be healing our vehicle. Quite a few direct hits there, but thankfully very little damage actually done. The power of stacked armor versus crams is phenomenal. Yep, still doing okay, although this time a few rams were dislodged along with a fair bit of armor on the side. It's going to be, can it catch up? And yep, it got stuck on one of its own blocks. That is definitely one of the weaknesses of a melee vehicle using wheels. Hello there. And there goes a chunk of armor. Was still hit by the cram, though. That shield going down is actually very telling. Perhaps a battery section was removed there. It does have 4 battery sections, though, so a lot of redundancy. Oh, listen to that. So many explosions, and there it is, 2 damaged. It can indeed beat a Bison one-on-one, and the shield's still up. I wonder what actually happened there, then. Oh, no, there it goes down again. Yeah, perhaps 1 battery section is down, so it's very slightly weakened in terms of energy. It lost 7% health. That's it. Well, I would consider that then a massive success. If this thing can kill a Bison one-on-one, it's definitely good enough to go out into the battlefield, considering even the Pharaoh tanks don't always win versus the Bison. Man, it can really tank those cram shots. Now, what I'm hoping is that the enemy won't actually focus on this thing during the battle. I really don't know. Maybe it should be a bit faster. Keeps getting stuck on something. Not quite sure what's going on there. And now this is very annoying. Will it ever actually reach the target? That is the question. Moments later, the question is answered. Yeah, everyone get in the air. Oh, look at that, landing on its turret and completely obliterating it. That was glorious. That's like a wrestling move. Yeah, maybe I should put the speed back up a little bit. So, a few minor changes before the next episode, but overall, I really do think this thing is very close to being done. Just a few changes to make it look a bit prettier, although I actually really like how it looks now, and its very simplistic design. This thing is going to be devastating versus the Onyx Watch. Not so sure about the other factions, maybe the Steel Empire, but definitely against the Onyx Watch. I wonder what it is getting stuck on. Perhaps one of the blocks is a bit too low, so it's catching on that as well. Either way, I'll just let it heal up, and then we'll end the episode. And so the shield is invisible. Now don't worry, the shield is still there, but I've simply turned off its colouring. This way, it looks a little bit better. So, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. In the next video, we will be going back to the campaign and testing this out in some live battles. I can see some horrible things happening with the Pharaoh tanks doing a bit of friendly fire and the missiles and everything else, but I think it's just going to be a really, really fun craft. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.